Game design and game development. Two of the most creatively exciting, if you're into video games of course, and unexpectedly challenging crafts that will both give you that 3 AM motivation and make you want to pull your hair out. Hey, what's up everyone, I'm AmzroSevca, and today I'm going to talk about the two primary ends of putting together a video game. Over the course of my life, I've been involved in both game design and game development to various extents, either on the basis of solo projects or team efforts. Due to the amount of time I've spent trying to develop video games and getting only as far as a few functional demos, I wanted to discuss some of the concepts I pursued and the problems I ran into. Hopefully this video will provide you with inspiration to make your own games and knowledge about the common pitfalls that come with the entire process. And just to add, this video will largely focus on projects that were spearheaded by me. I've worked on video game projects ranging from fan games to ROM hacks that were led by other people, but much of the logistical issues were not in my hands since I was not the manager of those projects by any means. So, to kick things off, let's run over some of the concepts I've attempted so far and how they turned out. First up is Sonic Gears, a Sonic fan game built on a framework I was developing for physics-based platforming games using the G-Develop engine. Unfortunately at the time that I was building it, some features relating to curves, slopes, and spherical gravity in a 2D space were simply not possible with the engine. The game was coming along fine until the SSD I was building on unexpectedly died and I lost all of the source files. Luckily I backed up an exported build of the game that was set to appear at stage 2019, but I eventually pulled it due to it having a missing asset problem. Then there was Rosanna, a survival horror point-and-click game that had the player navigating through various scenes in a non-linear story based on the aesthetics of franchises such as Alien and Metroid. The project was abandoned after the core gameplay loop proved to be functional since I didn't have the time to continue its development and had no greater vision for the project after I discovered how limiting the experience was. A few years prior to Rosanna, I'd experimented with the idea of a more narrative-driven game akin to a visual novel across the text RPG called Registered Discord that would be based on franchises such as Transformers, Gundam, Mega Man, and Astro Boy. The game would have RPG elements where you could collect items, engage in battles, etc. as you read through the chapters. It was going to have 5 books that would contain 5 chapters each. Every book would have a middle boss and a final boss encounter at chapters 3 and 5 where the player would have to utilize their inventory to find a way to defeat the boss. However, many of my choose-your adventure text-based RPG concepts were abandoned in favor of making more traditional RPG games that would have been inspired by JRPG franchises in the 90s. One of those projects was titled Kingdom Concert and pulled heavily on series such as Square Enix's Mana and Namco's Tales of. However, never got far beyond the game design document phase due to another project that was running partially in parallel to it titled Inseed, which got beyond the game design document phase and was beginning to have early engine work done before the team behind the game dissolved entirely due to management problems. Unlike Kingdom Concert, I still have a handful of the assets belonging to Inseed that were serving as a groundwork for constructing the environment and defining the gameplay loop. Unlike Kingdom Concert, which was going to be strictly a traditional turn-based RPG built in RPG Maker, Inseed was going to be a real-time version of Earthbound's combat system combined with war map strategy gameplay akin to Advanced Wars. The idea is that you would have an overworld that was made up of open fields and various theaters of war where you can manage units against armies and then control an individual party of characters that would fight individual enemies between those battlefields on the open field areas. The overall parties would consist of characters that also might be commanding officers of your forces out in the battlefield. You would be able to pick up items and powers of the overworld that could be used to turn the tide of war on the front lines as well. Now, having said all of that, one thing that all the projects I've worked on have in common is that none of them ever got to any kind of final state. The closest I ever got to quote-unquote going gold with any title was the beta stage of development. This is largely due to a few factors that I think many new game developers need to be aware of. The first, of course, is scale and scope. Not understanding what's realistically achievable with the amount of time that you have in your hands to dedicate to a project will almost always guarantee that the project will never get finished. Even if you're confident in your skills for developing a video game, if you don't have the necessary time to get what you want done in the time frame you set for yourself, you'll begin to lose motivation as you reschedule deadlines constantly or straight up procrastinate doing work in certain categories. If you have too busy of a schedule that is crowded with a job, studying for a degree, or engaging in other hobbies, you need to plan accordingly or just wait. Know that the amount of time that you have in your hands and how long you want to spend developing the project will dictate what the scope of your project will be. I always suggest setting a smaller project window and starting very small with a scope to where, by the levels of your own skill set, it'll be relatively quote-unquote easy to achieve. I put easy in air quotes since game development is never really easy. This might mean that instead of attempting to make the next generative live service MMO battle royale triple quadruple experience, you try to replicate the core gameplay loop of Pac-Man with colored squares. I know that sounds unexciting on the surface, but trust me, you will always thank yourself later for deciding to do something that you can actually achieve within your current capabilities and have extra time on hand to figure out bugs and problems with your programming logic. The next factor is the flexibility of your vision. Your game design document should be a living document. Never overcommit to a singular idea of what your game should be like because chances are half of the ideas you write down in your game design document on day 1 will be gone by day 50. This is largely because ideas that you think might work well in your game will often change as you begin to actually assemble it. Either you run into programming challenges, realize that it would require more assets than you're willing to make, or discover that it complicates or breaks the gameplay loop that you're trying to perfect. Being flexible about the vision of your game is even more so important when it comes to working with a team where you won't be the only one contributing ideas and feedback as a product is shaped into its final form. And speaking of teams, this segues nicely into the next factor. Making a video game alone is always going to be easier than making a video game with a team. While having a team can be nice so that you can have individuals with certain specializations focusing entirely on one aspect or another of the game, it can also make the development process a hell of a lot worse. The amount of time that you'll spend assembling the team, navigating social dynamics between team members, and trying to get people to produce stuff on time with no immediate monetary compensation is almost always going to be double the amount of time it would take you to just develop everything yourself. And while it might sound scary to develop every aspect of the game yourself, you'll have the massive benefit of becoming a multimedia designer and developer that understands all aspects of game development from writing to coding to music composition. When you're working by yourself, you can go at your own pace with everything and not have to wait for meetings to occur or pull teeth to get assets produced. If you need more time for something, great. If you got something done quicker than expected, no worries. Just move on to the next thing without having to wait for that one person on the graphics team to finish that last 5 frames of a sprite sheet 6 months later. One of the most surefire ways to kill a game or send it into development hell is to have team members who are not contributing to the project at a consistent rate along with everyone else, or having the team dissolve due to a lack of motivation or interpersonal drama. If you're relying on other people for the development of certain elements, assets, and attributes and everyone starts to go their separate ways, it is extremely difficult to restructure the project and keep it alive, especially if those people pull the work for the project and didn't sign any kind of production agreement. And oftentimes, if you're not paying team members, no one's going to sign anything like that because why would they? You have zero material compensation to keep them or their contributions attached to your project. Having said all of that, one thing I want to emphasize the most in this video is that failure is not a bad thing. I have many unfinished or straight up broken game projects. Failure is progress. Even if you develop your first game and realize you bit off more than you could chew, there are valuable experiences in doing so that will help you plan better for the next attempt. The only real failure is permanently giving up out of spite or believing that your attempts were a waste of time. Sometimes it's good to take a break from a project and come back to it later. Sometimes it's good to go join an existing project and learn by absorbing knowledge from others as you work alongside them. And sometimes it's fun to publish that half-working beta on GitHub for those who might be curious about where you've been for 3 years, and move on to something completely different that you believe you'll have much better success with. At this point in my game development journey, I plan on taking a break from making video games for a few years to focus on other areas of my life, play through my same backlog of games, resume modding games for fun, and think about what kind of games I actually want to develop down the road and of what realistically achievable scale. There are many other ends of my skill set ranging from photography to music composition that I also want to give more time to since I've been getting more and more ideas lately for projects that have nothing really to do with video games specifically. Just remember that you probably won't make your dream game the first go around, but you have the ability to make it eventually with enough willpower, assuming it's something that can feasibly be done by a single person in whatever X number of years. But that about wraps up this discussion, so I'll catch you guys in the next video.